Hello everyone and welcome back to the coverage of the 2019 FIDE World Cup. We've entered the Blitz section, so after the four classical games, they went into the rapid section. All four rapid games were drawn, and now we are in the Blitz section. So if two more Blitz games are drawn, or if each wins one game, then we enter the Armageddon. So this is game one of the Blitz. And Ding has the white pieces. We're not going to overanalyze it as it is Blitz, but if an interesting, really interesting line occurs, of course, we will show it. So with the white pieces, Ding opens with knight to f3. We have knight to f6, g3. We have d5 by Radjabov and the bishop to g2. So the Reti is on the board. We have e6, castles by Ding, and the bishop to e7, also preparing the castle. d4, we have castles by Radjabov, and now c4. D captures on c4, queen to c2 going after the pawn, and a6. Now allowing white to capture on c4 with a4 first, preventing b5. Sorry, that's not a b5, preventing b5. And now bishop to d7 by Radjabov. As a white will most likely recapture the pawn, you want to transfer your bishop to this very nice diagonal. So queen captures on c4 by Ding, and now bishop to c6. We have bishop to f4 by Ding, and now bishop to d6, offering another trade, and now queen back to c1. If captures, then the queen can recapture on f4 instead of the pawn. Knight bc7, knight b to d7, and now rook to e1 by Ding. We have queen to e7, developing the queen, connecting rooks, and the knight to c3. And here we have bishop captures on f3, bishop captures on f3, bishop captures on f4, queen captures on f4, and now c6 here. And this just proves how deep Radjabov's preparation goes, as Ding already had his position on the board in the 2017 World Rapid Championship against Petr Leko. And the game continued in the same fashion. Ding played a5 against Leko, and the difference is Leko in that game played e5 right away, whereas Radjabov improves it with rook 8 to d8. So rook 8 to d8 is a new move in the position as of move 16, which basically tells us that Radjabov knows about the game Ding played against Leko, even though it was a rapid game, and that he is very much prepared to play this position. So rook e to d1 by Ding, and now comes e5, as it's prepared, both queen and knight to guard that pawn. Queen to e3, you cannot recapture as the queen is hanging on e7, so rook f to e8, just getting a defender to the queen, and now d5 by Ding. So here you have to decide whether you want to trade here or do you want to push e4. Radjabov pushes e4, and now Ding has to decide whether bishop to g2 or d captures on c6. So Ding decides for bishop to g2, and now comes c captures on d5, knight captures, we have rook captures, and now knight to f6, offering more captures. We have rook captures on d8, rook captures, and now h3. So we have this position where white seems to be a little bit better because of the blockade on the queen side. Black's queen side pawns aren't really going anywhere, and the e4 pawn for the moment seems to be a bit weak. So Radjabov has to show us what he prepared. With queen to b4, putting pressure on the a5 pawn as the rook can come to d5, go after the pawn, also pressuring the b2 pawn. b3 by Ding, defending it, and now we have h5. Here Radjabov likes his position. He wants to always have an option of playing h4, also creates an additional escape square for the king if needed. Just a very useful move. King to h2 by Ding, improving the position of his king, and now comes rook to d5, going after this pawn here. There were a lot of ideas here. Maybe we want to go queen to d2, trade queens, maybe queen to d4, try and force a queen trade as it comes with an attack on the rook, but Radjabov tries an active plan, going after the a5 pawn. And now we have queen to f4 by Ding, which is interesting, as well, you have to ask yourselves what happens after rook to a4. It's an interesting line, so we're going to show it. Radjabov's plan was queen to e1, and it gives up a pawn, but for very good counterplay. For example, bishop captures on e4, knight captures, rook captures, now comes rook to d1, and now if you don't want to get mated, you have to do something. Rook e8 check, king h7, and now queen to e4 check, which now allows you to gain control of this diagonal. g6 and queen to g2, you're up a pawn, but you will have your hands full defending this position, and if black wants to, he will always be able to pick the pawn up back. So after rook to d5, we don't have this idea of rook to a4, but rather Ding goes for queen to f4. And okay, we have rook captures on a5 now, rook captures, queen captures, and now the idea behind queen to f4, queen to b8 check. king to h7, and now you pick up the b7 pawn. And now queen to f5 by Radjabov going after the f2 pawn. With king to g1, now defending, and here e3. Radjabov sacrifices a pawn. You don't want to push something like f3 or f4 here, then it's just a very dangerous pawn on e3. So here Ding captures it. He's up a pawn, but his pawn structure is a bit messed up. Queen to e6, now attacking, pressuring the b3 pawn really, but attacking the e3 pawn. King to f2 defending, and now here the time on the clock is 1 minute versus 30 seconds. So Radjabov really down on the clock. We have queen to f5 with check, queen back to f3 defending, and now queen back to e6 attacking the b3 pawn. And here Ding manages to defend it with e4. So now the b3 pawn is defended by the queen, and he gets to keep his extra pawn. With g6 by Radjabov, and now comes king to g1. Ding wants to push back his king, so it will be much safer there. And now knight to d7. So it's a really awkward position, but even though Ding is up a pawn, he has 3 pawn islands and the doubled e pawn. It's going to be very hard to capitalize on that. Queen to c3 by Ding, not allowing knight to c5 to go for the double attack against the pawns. And now knight to e5 with b4 by Ding, cementing that a6 pawn on a light square. And now queen to d6. We have king to f2. Now, the king will also help out with the defense of the pawns, and here both players are below 10 seconds, playing on the 3-second increment, so you can imagine things were very crazy here. So knight to c6 with a double attack on the b4 pawn, queen c5, no, that's not what happened, queen c5, just offering to trade queens and defending the pawn. And now queen to d4 check. Here Radjabov forces a trade with captures, and now e5. And the knight to c2. Radjabov goes after the b4 pawn to create a passed pawn of his own, and now comes bishop to d5, saying I want to grab the f7 pawn. Radjabov defends it, and now e6. With f captures, bishop captures, and knight captures on b4. So the material on the board is equal now, but Radjabov has a passed a pawn. On the other hand, Ding has a bishop against a knight, so with play on both sides of the board, bishop should be preferred. With king to e3, and now king to f6. Bishop back to d7, and now king to e5. With bishop to e8 going after the pawns here, and now knight to d5 with check. King d3, and now knight to e7. So using the check to remaneuver the knight to defend his pawns. With king to c4, now Ding wants to go after the a6 pawn, and now a5, taking away the b4 square. With king to c5, and now king back to f6 by Radjabov. And here, like I said, both of them are very low on the clock. And here you want to go bishop to b5, but Ding went king to b5, and he enters a race. So my queenside pawn for your kingside pawns. Let's see who's faster. And okay, knight to f5 goes after the g3 pawn with king captures here, knight captures on g4, and now bishop back to b5, defending the e2 pawn with g5 and king b4. Now Ding has to get his king back into the game with king to e5, king to c3, and now king to f4. And here Ding misplays, instead of king d4, he went king to d2. What you want to do is play king d4 here. And now even if you're checked, then you go king to d3, and now king to g3 is met with the very strong e4. So now you will lose this pawn, but your passed e pawn will give you enough counterplay. But here Ding goes king to d2, and now the position really gets messy. We have knight to e4 check, king to e1, and now king to g3. And now, as you can see, it's very different. It's similar, but instead of you being able to start pushing your e pawn, there's a knight on e4 blocking you. So bishop d7, defending the pawn here, but now h4. With e3 by Ding, and knight to f2, going after the h3 pawn. There's no way to defend it. With king to f1, and now knight captures on h3. Radjabov wins a pawn, and only now can Ding start pushing the pawn. With knight to f4, and now e5. With h3, and now comes bishop to c6, keeping an eye on this diagonal, but now h2. With bishop back to b7, Ding just has to wait and see what Radjabov will do. And now g4, preparing to move the king and start pushing the g pawn as well. We have bishop to c6, and now comes king to h3. And here, bishop back to b7. Ding doesn't have an active plan here. g3, and now bishop to c8, check here. King has to go back. We have king to h4, and now bishop back to b7. So it seems like Ding is holding here, but now Radjabov goes after the passed pawn, and with that gone, it's gonna be pretty much game over. Bishop to e4, not allowing the king to approach the pawn, and now king back to g4 with e6, giving up a pawn, but there is no other move. We have knight captures on e6, and now king to g2. This allows the king back into the game, but now knight back to f4 check. King h1, and now knight to h3. And here, Ding gave up his pawn. That was pretty much the only thing he could do to try some sneaky ideas, like bishop to f3 check. He played this. Of course, if Radjabov captures, it's a stalemate, and Radjabov did not capture. We have king to f4, and now comes king to g2. So defending it, but now knight to f2, and here your bishop is no longer guarding the h1 square, so h1 queen is the threat. Ding moved the king to f1, and of course now Radjabov just captured the bishop on f3, and it was in this position that Ding resigned the game, as well, he has to move the king, and then a queen enters the game with check. So a tough break for Ding after getting a lead in the classical time format. Then Radjabov equalized, then 4 rapid games drawn, then first blitz game with the white pieces, a loss for Ding Liren. But Teimour Radjabov, brilliant game with black, really spent a lot of time, but in the end he just showed what an incredible fighter he is, and he took down Ding in the blitz section. And I don't have to remind you that Ding was the world blitz champion at one point. So yeah, really insane. Next game, Ding gets the black pieces, and he will get his chance to retaliate. So as soon as you finish watching this game, most likely I will be uploading the other game as well, so we'll see what happens there. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Ferdinand Albin and Linus Ryan and Charles Schroeder for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with the next game of the Blitz section. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.